Welcome. Welcome. Welcome to another City Club program. My name is Susan Kelly, president of the club. Today we focus on what City Club is all about, the power of volunteerism. Our speakers are Alison Carl, executive director of VolunteerWorks, Kate McPherson, director of Project Service Leadership in Vancouver, Washington, and Jack McGowan, executive director of SOLV. This is the last Friday program of the summer. For the next month, we will be taking our usual hiatus from Friday forums. We'll begin again in September with another outstanding year of programs and some exciting political debates, and I hope we'll be back in our regular space. In the meantime, many of our members will be busily working on the preparation of resolutions and ballot measure studies. Anyone interested in obtaining a video or audio of this program or other City Club programs, you can do so by calling Suzanne at the office, 20 for the video and 10 for the audio. Our board host, seated at the head of the table, is Gwen Milius, a member of the Board of Governors and marketing coordinator for WPH Architects. She will have the privilege of asking the first question of our speakers. Following Gwen's question, please line up behind the microphone and be ready as Gwen is finished, so we're ready to answer as many questions as possible. Please identify yourself as a member of City Club and ask your question in 30 seconds, and perhaps if it's specific to one of the speakers, you can mention that, or all three will answer. Broadcast of City Club programs this quarter is made possible in part by corporate underwriting from Kaiser Permanente, Wells Fargo Bank, and Zimmer Gunsel Frasca. We are very grateful for their support. Thank you, sponsors. Alison Carl has been the director of VolunteerWorks since 2000. It's a nonprofit committed to making every person in Portland a volunteer. She was previously CEO of Federal Way Chamber of Commerce in Federal Way, Washington, and she is a graduate of Pacific Lutheran University. Alison will be speaking about the big picture of volunteer involvement, the importance of capacity building and community engagement, and different types of volunteers. Kate McPherson has been the director of Project Service Leadership in Vancouver since 1987. Kate has provided technical assistance to schools, colleges, and businesses, helping them design service learning programs. She previously worked as an 8th grade teacher in the Portland Public School system and in various education planning roles. Kate graduated from the University of Chicago and has a Master of the Arts in Teaching from Reed College. Kate will focus on the importance of engaging youth in service. She will illustrate why service is important for positive youth development, how our communities benefit from the involvement of youth, and how service is helping to enrich classroom learning. She will provide practical ways to help more students develop academic, personal, and civic skills through service. For the past 12 years, Jack McGowan has held the position of Executive Director of SOLV, Oregon's largest volunteer nonprofit organization. SOLV was founded in 1969 by Governor Tom McCall and is best known for the twice annual Great Oregon Beach Cleanups. SOLV has grown into much more, coordinating 12 separate programs that touch every corner of the state. In the 80s, Jack was a correspondent for KGW-TV and an assistant to Mayor Bud Clark. He has worked in public relations and public affairs and was instrumental in the original Mount Hood Jazz Festival, and he is the creator, idea man behind your zoo and all that jazz. Get the jazz right. The jazz man. And Jack is originally from New York City. He will be giving us his impressions about today's concept of volunteerism and its positive impact on society. With that, we welcome our first speaker, Alison.
Thank you so much for having me here today. VolunteerWorks is really committed to volunteerism, so it's my pleasure to share with you kind of what's going on with volunteerism sort of around the country and then certainly locally here in Portland, just to kind of set the stage for you. In addition to City Club talking about volunteerism, the president's talking about volunteerism. A little bit to our surprise, during the State of the Union address, he kind of called for all Americans to dedicate 4,000 hours of service. The Corporation for National and Community Service, who houses or is the umbrella organization for AmeriCorps, Peace Corps, the Senior Corps projects, has responded to the President's call with Homeland Security grants, to which Oregon is a proud recipient of some of those dollars. The American Red Cross Oregon Chapter Trail received some dollars to engage volunteers in disaster preparedness. Our United Way, that serves our community here, has responded to community needs with an impact area around helping hands and volunteerism. The Oregon State Commission for National and Community Service has been charged with working on our benchmark for volunteerism and increasing the number of Oregonians who are volunteering. Portland Public Schools has as one of their 3 objectives, all of our students willingly, emphasis on willingly, and regularly contributing to the community. We also are really fortunate to have a corporate community that really embraces volunteerism. If you look down the list of corporate volunteer council members, it's sort of a who's who of high-profile businesses in the Portland metro area. Each of these organizations have paid staff dedicated to engaging their employees in volunteerism. Nike, Intel, Washington Mutual, Pacific Corps, the Blazers, Legacy, PGE, Kaiser, UPS, Fred Meyer, all have recognized the value to them as corporate community members, but also to their employees. Another group that has really helped, I think, in keeping the volunteerism conversation moving forward is KGW. I'm sure you've seen their Give 8 campaign that's run over the last couple of years, encouraging people to get involved. But most recently with their Do Something Good campaign as a lead into our Celebrating Our Community celebration over the September 11th time frame. So overall, I think you can see that there's really some energy behind having the conversation about how important volunteerism is and how it really contributes to the high quality of life that we have here in Portland. One of the things that VolunteerWorks has really been focusing on is it's great for us to get people excited about volunteering, and I would venture to guess that if I ask any of you to volunteer, you would probably say yes in some capacity. But what does that mean for the organizations that we're putting volunteers into? So one of the things that is really important to us, and I think us as a community, is really looking at the infrastructure that we need in order to effectively engage people in volunteer service. One of the things that we like to talk about is capacity building and infrastructure. So that when we ask people to come into our organizations, they have a good experience, and then they go and tell their friends what a good experience they've had, which will then start to really build out the number of people that we can have doing work and really addressing some of our community needs. It's really difficult, I think, sometimes as nonprofits to make that investment in infrastructure. And one of my favorite examples right now is what United Way has done with their Helping Hands initiative around volunteerism. It would be very easy, I think, to say we need to put more marketing dollars so that we can recruit more volunteers. That's the high profile, that's the one that you can see, you can put in your little grant proposal and have folks feel good about. It's harder to invest in infrastructure because it's harder to really feel the tangible benefit of that. This year within the Helping Hands grants for volunteerism, all of the dollars went to infrastructure building. Within one of the coalitions, we will come out with a real end product that will make a systemic impact on the work of volunteerism, a 4-county online database, volunteer management training in each of our counties, which will directly impact your experiences as volunteers, whether it's getting connected to an organization or it's just in being involved with a program that's well run. So I always, whenever I get a chance to be in front of a group of people, make sure that I make my pitch for how important it is to not just donate your money to organizations and new programs, but to really invest in infrastructure so that we can continue to build up our volunteer programs. So that's kind of the serious part of volunteerism. Now what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about the different types of volunteers. I was having a conversation this morning with some folks about the types of volunteers, and I would venture to guess that most people, when they think of volunteer, they have a pretty narrow definition. They're thinking you go to an agency and you volunteer. And I'd like to kind of challenge how you're thinking about volunteering. Volunteering could be a service learning requirement for a school. Volunteering could be an activist who cares about the environment. Volunteering could be a board member. Volunteering could be helping your elderly neighbor mow their lawn. I think as we really start to engage people, we need to honor who they are, what their talents are. At VolunteerWorks, we've tried to really embrace that and start to look at our needs holistically. Starting with, it doesn't matter how much time you give or where you give it. What we care about is that you're involved and you're engaged in the community. Secondly, there are so many needs in our communities and so many opportunities to serve. You should do something that you care about, and you should be doing work that matters to the organization, and that we really align those needs. And volunteerism is going to look different at different times in your life. I put together kind of my little list of how volunteerism may look different at different times. You could be a newly retired person looking to stay active and give back to your community, and you could do that as a tutor with Oasis. You might be a young professional looking for a quick and easy way to be involved with your community and meet people. You could do that through a TeamWorks project with Hands on Portland. You may be a person in job transition and you want to use your volunteer experience to develop your skills in marketing and PR, and you could do that with the American Cancer Society Relay for Life Committee. You may be on a career path and you need to strengthen your community knowledge and your leadership skills, and you could do that by serving on the board for Committed Partners for Youth. You may be a family looking to really instill service values in your children and do something as a family. You could do that doing one of the Friends of Forest Park's Ivy Poll. Or you might be a student with a required service learning project, and it's the last week of the semester, and you could connect with SOLV's Make It Right team and get that requirement fulfilled. I think there are a lot of opportunities for people to serve. It's really just putting what you want, what you expect, and aligning that with what organizations are looking for, which is where VolunteerWorks comes in handy. We support 260 organizations in the Portland metro area. We've got 1,100 volunteer opportunities that we're recruiting for right now. The best way to get connected is on our website. This is the shameless plug, by the way, volunteerworks.org. And we will help get you connected to the right place. So with that, I think I will turn it over to the service learning guru of all time, Kate McPherson.
I want to also thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak about the real importance of engaging youth in service. And clearly in Portland, there's a real recognition of that. I noticed in the recent report on philanthropy by the Giving in Oregon report that one of the recommendations is that all Oregon school children will experience and learn the value of volunteering. And it's interesting that the more than 400 community members who participated in Portland Public Schools' strategic planning process concluded that service was important enough that it should be one of the district's 3 strategic objectives. I applaud your vision because I think engaging youth in meaningful service opportunities is important for a variety of reasons. First and foremost, maybe because we need them. They have ideas and they are part of being a solution in our community. They have many unique gifts and contributions to make. Nothing could put a smile on the face of a lonely senior citizen more quickly than a young child. Connecting children and the elderly enhances the lives of both people. Because elementary children idolize high schoolers, they make great teachers. Seattle City Light partnered a high school drama program to provide their energy conservation assemblies, and both students and teachers rated those assemblies far higher than the quality of the assemblies that had been done by adults and employees of that business before. One district exploits youth's technical talents by involving them as internet navigators. They both help teachers find engaging online resources, and they've actually trained elementary, middle, and high school students to be coaches for the teachers to help them learn more technical skills. And an interesting national project called the Genome Project actually involved over 100 teachers, 4,000 advanced biology students, and collaboratively they have established a DNA library for the National Institute for Health. Students studied the chromosomes to determine their link to specific diseases, verifying their findings with each other, and were able to put online and within the health district substantial research that really will help us nationally to code the DNA information that's available to us. The talent and energy of young people is probably one of our most untapped resources. Youth also need to be needed. The Search Institute, which is a nationally recognized research organization, has identified 40 essential elements that help young people live healthy, enriched lives and avoid dangerous at-risk behaviors. Service to others, feeling valued, promoting equality, and developing a sense of purpose are a few of those assets. Most of you in this room have felt the wonderful glow of service, that deep inside you joy that comes from helping others. This sense of well-being, coupled with the sense of being valued, is especially important during adolescent years when many young people struggle with depression or self-doubt. In our increasingly mobile society, young people just struggle to find a sense of place and purpose. Service is a powerful way to develop both. Schools are more effective when they connect learning with service, and a growing number of schools and teachers are invigorating learning by thoughtfully connecting service with the acquisition of academic skills through a program called Service Learning. I discovered my first year of teaching, struggling to make learning come alive in the with 8th grade classroom, the power of service learning. And I'll tell you the story of one of my students. In my 8th grade class, I had an 8th grade student named Roger. Now, Roger, as an 8th grader, read at a 2nd grade reading level. To be very honest, he was very content continuing to read at a 2nd grade reading level, despite all of my efforts to change that. I did anything I could think of, greeting him at the door, positive reinforcement, connecting him with another more capable student and hope that that person would be a good mentor. And I'm also a pretty good basketball player, so I'd play basketball during recess to build relationships. But with Roger, none of those strategies were working. And about January, I have to say with great humility, I was about to give up on Roger, sort of deciding that maybe he was one of those students I wouldn't reach. I was very fortunate in that I had a vice principal who thought otherwise. She said, "Why don't you have Roger tutor 2nd graders?" And I must confess, my first thought was, I'm not sure I want to send Roger down into that 2nd grade classroom, because not only was he not a good reader, he was fairly disruptive. And I didn't want that 2nd grade teacher thinking badly of me because I had sent a bad student her way. But luckily my vice principal persisted, and I have to confess part of my thinking was, well, at least Roger will be gone for a few hours a week, and I will have a break and have a little more peaceful classroom. But what happened transformed my philosophy about teaching and learning. Roger was introduced to that 2nd grade student by his teacher as Mr. Jones the teacher. Roger, for the first time, had a reason to read, and it was to help that 2nd grader who was a struggling reader really learn the basics. Roger knew what it was like to be a 2nd grade student who was not getting it. He didn't want that other student to struggle in the same way he did, and he had the patience to be a wonderful tutor. In the process, not only did he start coming to class more often because he didn't want to disappoint his student, but he became a better reader. In the last half of that year, Roger's reading scores went up 4 grade levels. It wasn't only because of the tutoring, but because we had lots of assistance that was being provided for him. But that assistance had been there before. It was truly that he had an authentic, purposeful reason to read that he saw as important, and that was to help another student. What service learning can do is to really engage students in learning in a much different way, in that it really gives them a purpose, gives them a context, and it gives them a sense of personal value. And I saw, for the first time as a teacher, the power of what this can do for teaching and learning. Another example as a classroom teacher where service really helped learning come alive was as a contemporary world problems teacher in high school, where I struggled to help issues around international problems really have a life to them. One of my commitments after my experience with Roger was to have students take one issue we were studying and look at what they could do to make a difference. Many of you look at papers in the newspaper and you see a picture of some child who's starving in another country. Most of us turn the page because we feel so hopeless. Well, one of my students decided that that was her issue. She wanted to look at what she could do to help students who were in Cambodia and who are struggling from the effects of war. Initially, I must confess, as a teacher, I thought, try something simpler, something closer to home. But she persisted. She organized in our school a concert that raised $3,000. In the process, she also researched which organizations would actually get the supplies to the infants. How could she most effectively use the resources? She learned that certain organizations were politically favored and certain were not politically favored. She learned far more about international affairs and contemporary world problems through this project, and all of a sudden the rest of her classmates became allies in helping her be successful. What a joy in the classroom when we got a letter back from the orphanage that she had provided enough supplies for 150 infants, and she saw the personal results of her work. I wouldn't be surprised but that she's somewhere else in the planet doing some good works around international relief. I have to get a clean. And service learning is alive here in Portland as well. Marshall High School has worked with the Portland Development Commission to design and produce informational kiosks so residents can now receive information about their urban renewal project. Advanced technology students have developed the touch-activated software. The art students have worked with the artistic design of a public plaza. And the senior government classes have discovered that there's an important bird and fish habitats in their neighborhood. And they're now also helping to organize an annual livability summit. The environmental middle school students develop presentation skills and writing skills, as well as learn more about the scientific process as they develop learning stations and teach younger students about ecosystems and animal habitats. SOLV is helping 3 fifth-grade students classrooms and 1 fourth-grade class at Kelly Elementary to do a naturescaping of their school grounds and create a habitat and space for future learning. And elementary students are actually working with Providence Hospital to collect data on their birth rates, the number, sex, ethnicities of their births, and then they're actually helping to put that into a visual representation so other people can understand the things that are happening in that particular hospital. Service learning is where students use their skills in a way that helps the community. It's not only a nice thing to do, it's a smart way to teach. So one of the things we know is that what we retain is far more with what we do. So that what we have found that actually if we hear something, we'll probably remember it in 2 weeks, about 12%. If we teach it to someone else, as Roger did his reading, we're likely to retain it as much as 90%. Brandeis University has done extensive research in service learning programs around the country, and they have found that students involved in service learning scored significantly higher on 4 of 11 evaluation measures, including school involvement, grades, core subject grade averages, and educational aspirations. So we know that indeed service learning is a powerful way of teaching and learning. It also helps students and schools to meet the civic mission of schools. It's interesting that while schools certainly think that, and Americans often think that schools need to teach core academic knowledge and skills, they also look to the educational system to develop students who become active, competent, and worthy stewards of our democratic traditions and institutions. The mission of public schools of Portland includes to prepare students to contribute as citizens of a diverse, multicultural, and international community. If we are able to engage youth in becoming active citizens in our communities, we have to provide them with practical opportunities to apply those skills and practice them. And I'm going to give you just a couple of very quick examples of where that's happening. An example at Troutdale Elementary School is that the students actually gathered information about a local stream quality and the impact of storm water drain runoff in their fish habitat. They then presented their findings to their city council and made recommendations for change. In Vancouver, an 8th grader concerned about how many people were speeding in his neighborhood actually coded and took data about the number of students, people in their community who were driving, at what times of the day, what their speeds were. He gathered that information and then presented it to his neighborhood association and then to the city council, and they actually got speed bumps put into his own neighborhood. So service learning not only engages kids in applying their learning, but it also helps them learn how to become citizens. Jack will speak later about how it also helps to build community, which is an important piece. The one thing I would like to encourage you, I have no time, is to look at what you can do, and I guess I'll have to do that during the question. So what you can ask me during the question time is the way that you as an individual, either within your families or organizations, what you can do to help really develop the capacity in your own organizations or families for service learning. And I do want to make sure that you realize that the Portland Public Schools are engaged in looking at how to take that strategic plan and put it into action. And we really want to invite you, which I will do during the question session, a little more specifically, how you can participate in that process. So be sure to ask me how you can do that.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, Madam President, members of the City Club, for inviting us today. This is tough to follow these two great people and for me to try to do clean up batting here, but I'm going to try at least. We were talking about volunteerism, and volunteerism, of course, really is one of the defining, I think, pillars of this country. Americans volunteer more than any other country. American society builds itself on volunteerism and community building. And as Alison said right now, that is really the buzzword of the country, coming from the president to our own governor to local community, business, and religious leaders. And to think about volunteerism is extraordinarily important, but what I want to do is try to take volunteerism to the nth degree, to the final concept of what volunteerism truly is about. And what I'd like to do, and I know that we have a radio audience, so I'm going to translate visually what I see into at least some type of statistic that the radio audience can digest. I have 3 questions for you. First question, be honest, all 3. How many of you are native-born Oregonians? Raise your hand. I would say it's less than 10% of the audience. Now here comes the real honest part. How many of us were born elsewhere? Raise your hand. There you go. Third question. How many of you are glad that you live in Oregon? Raise your hand. That's community. That's unanimity. That's what it's about. That's the bond. That's the theme. That's the thread that runs through all of us and ties us together. I came up with a funny quote, and I hope I don't offend anybody in the audience, and you have to think about this one to get it. But my quote is that the only Oregonians who were taken kicking and screaming into Oregon were the ones that were born here. The rest of us, starting with Kennewick man and Kennewick woman and Kennewick child, and it continued on to the Oregon Trail, and even now, the rest of us came because we're looking for a better life for ourselves and our children. And that's really what Oregon is about. To so many of us, Oregon is the promised land. Back in 1969, as Susan said, Governor McCall was the founder of SOLV, and he came up with a dream. And he brought together remarkable men and women, people like John Passantini and Glenn Jackson and Norma Paulus and Edith Green and Hector McPherson and Ted Halleck, and these remarkable men and women who were the true leaders of Oregon in a bipartisan fashion. They collectively came up with an idea, and the idea was, could we have an organization that could really be the big tent, the big table, where diverse populations of Oregon could come together under one common theme, is that this is a heck of a place to go through life, and we can't take it for granted, and to give all Oregonians the opportunity to give something back to this remarkable treasure that gives all of us so much. And SOLV was formed. And as SOLV evolved and as McCall passed from the scene and others took the realm and the leadership of SOLV, SOLV evolved. It was formerly called Stop Oregon Litter and Vandalism. We dropped that about 7 years ago, just to the icon as opposed to an acronym of SOLV. SOLV, we can do things. SOLV is green, light. SOLV is stewardship. SOLV is engagement. SOLV is volunteerism. SOLV is community. And what we saw was that SOLV could link the 3 legs of Oregon, namely government, business, and citizens, in this threefold effort to preserve the livability of Oregon through the simple act of give back, the simple act of volunteerism. And so what we've done 33 years later is now that SOLV has engaged now approximately 96,000 volunteers in over 250 communities throughout the state. We perform over 2,000 projects yearly throughout the state. And last year, those wonderful volunteers donated over 620,000 hours of volunteerism throughout the state of Oregon. And what's so important about it, I think, and even more so in today's world of what Oregon is facing, it is not only the Portlands and the Salems and the Eugenes that have so much to win or so much to lose, but it is those other communities like Bly and Birkenfeld and Paisley and Plush and Monument and Kimberly and Harrisburg, North Powder. Those folks have just as much pride as the people in this room or the people that are listening to us today. And those folks have just as much to gain and just as much to lose as the folks in this audience. And that's what we truly have to look at, is the old adage of act locally, think globally. And in this case, it's thinking about Oregon as a whole. We talked about the beach cleanup. Thanks so much for that introduction, Susan. Susan talked about how SOLV started the world's first beach cleanup. Let me give you an idea about the beach cleanup, and let me translate that into what I'm talking about, how volunteerism can build community for Oregon. Almost 20 years ago, SOLV and its government partners, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife and Oregon Parks and Recreation Department, started this concept of the world's first beach cleanup. The mother of the beach cleanup was a remarkable woman named Judy Nielsen. Judy came to SOLV and said, we need to start cleaning up our coastline. It's filthy. So SOLV took the mantle, ran with it, and created the world's first beach cleanup. Now you think about the beach cleanup, and it's a remarkable testament of who we are as Oregonians. You think about that twice a year, 6,000 people wake up sleepy children on a Saturday morning, and they all drive down to the coast. And they get there at 10 o'clock, and in one magic moment in Oregon time, namely 3 hours, the entire concept, the entire coastline of Oregon is cleaned. From border to border, the last cigarette butt, the last piece of styrofoam, every single bit of the Oregon coast is cleaned by people who don't get paid. They're you, people who just get out there because they believe in Oregon and they want to make it a better place. And if you think that that's just what occurs, that is a wonderful statement about who we are as Oregonians. 6,000 people twice a year cleaning up their beloved coastline. But it's deeper. It's like the rock hitting the pond. The beach cleanup is the splash of the rock hitting the pond. The ripples that emanate from that rock are the ripples of community building. It's 6,000 Republicans and Democrats. It's 6,000 liberals and conservatives. It's 6,000 straights and gays. It's 6,000 CEOs and mailroom clerks and timber workers and environmentalists and urban and rural. It's 6,000 of you, 6,000 of us, 6,000 of them. And what occurs during that beach cleanup? Or what occurs when Alison puts together through VolunteerWorks a program? What really occurs is not just the concept that the activity is completed and that people can celebrate at the end of the day that they did a good job and they can put their head on the pillow at night and feel better about themselves and better about their children and better about their families and better about their state. It is the concept that 6,000 people paid less attention to what divided them and more attention to what united them, which is a basic love for this treasure called Oregon. In my history of leading SOLV for the past 12 years, what I've come to realize is really that community building doesn't just occur. It's not that you just come out and you say, oh, we built community today. I think it's much more subtle than that. Let me give you that example as the beach cleanup and think about 7 steps that I'd like to share with you that we as SOLV see are the 7 steps of community building. The first step is association. Those 6,000 people are associating under one type of common program. They're associating. And then from association comes dialogue. When people are painting out the graffiti, or they're cleaning up the beach, or they're restoring a wetland, or they're helping a senior citizen with their home, or they're cleaning up an illegal dump site, cleaning up a riverbank. It's association. And then the dialogue. We're working together. And then from the dialogue comes familiarity. My gosh, I never met someone like you before. I never met your kind before. I always thought you were different. And then from that familiarity comes trust. My gosh, maybe we can trust one another. Maybe there is some commonality that we can find as a building block. And from trust to consensus, my gosh, there are things we agree upon. And from consensus to vision, we have a united vision because we believe in each other, because we trust each other. And from vision to action, my gosh, we can do it. We can make Oregon a better place. We can pay less attention to the political, social, environmental, generational divides that tear at the fabric of this state. And collectively, we can build a better state. Collectively, we can create action towards that. And so I think what's so important, everyone, is the theme today, of course, is volunteerism. The theme today is community building. But really the theme today is action and vision of how we collectively can leave this room and create that type of dynamic in this state that makes Oregon a shining place to live, a better place for ourselves and our children. And that when each one of us are on our deathbed, when we're drawing the last breath, we can look at the next generation of Oregonian and not blink. We can look at them and say, we collectively came together and we tried to make Oregon a better place, and judge us for that. Thank you very much.
Guinevere Milius, City Club member. I have the privilege of the first question. First, I wanted to thank you all for your very moving and inspiring comments. My question is a rather long one. I'll try to make it short, though. We've heard a lot recently about the decline of young people's involvement in politics, particularly when it comes to the most basic political act of voting. However, we are also seeing greater numbers of young volunteers. This is a multi-part question, and I'll try to make it short. Are these trends related? Do you see a belief that politics are bad and volunteerism is good? Can volunteerism build a bridge to political activism for the young, or should volunteerism be apolitical? Whoever would like to.
Ladies? Go ahead. I'll add something. Go ahead.
Well, I think it's an interesting research that shows that a lot of students are skeptical around the traditional political process, and part of that is that it feels so distant from their lives, and some of it's what we see in the headlines, that there's a real tendency to sort of be skeptical of that process. I think what happens, and I was starting to get to a few of the examples, is where if service learning is one way, when students start to examine and volunteer, and I'll give another example, is students that I know who were studying the issue of homelessness. And they got out and they actually worked with Meals on Wheels and went in and actually met people who were transitioning from mental health care into housing and the struggle that they were experiencing. And out of that, what was initially a volunteer activity and just sort of looking at a social issue, they began to realize that there were real strong implications to some recent legislation that had changed the policies about how mental care is taken and what is our responsibility as a community for people who are struggling with mental illness. And they then realized that the only way to really prevent this or to make changes was to look at how to change the policies, and they started to work with legislation. And so I think that volunteering, if done thoughtfully, can actually lead to civic action, and to have people look at, and I hope our goal is not simply to be able to feed more homeless people, but it's instead how do we look at the causes of homelessness and how do we prevent it. So I think service learning, if done well, really needs to help students to examine the causes and then the role of the individual, the role of the community, and then the role of civic or policies around what's happening in our communities.
I think that was excellent, Kate. I agree with you. I think a couple of ideas. I think that civic engagement stems from volunteerism. People have to feel that they are engaged in their society, that they are a contributing member of society, and it doesn't matter how old they are. I'm not going to beat a dead horse, but that parent that brings the 4-year-old or the 7-year-old to volunteering activity is not only showing them education by example, but they're really building an ethic that child hopefully will take with them for the rest of their life, and then when that child grows up and has children, that ethic can continue and have a ripple effect in society. I think it's so important that people do feel that they're not alienated from society. I think the concept of what we now call the episodic volunteer is extraordinarily important for all age groups. You know, you think about the kids of today, and they're involved in 2 or 3 extracurricular activities. You think about the parents, soccer moms and soccer dads, and 2-income families, 1-parent families. All of these things are stressing the family unit and the child's relationship to society, because society is running at 150 miles an hour. And the concept of specifically engaging the child with the guardian or parent in some type of shared activity that gives back to the community, I think has immense amount of benefit in the future of how that child feels about the community. The alienation of youth is something that has to be looked at. But what we have to do as a society is not judge them for their alienation, but try to bring them in a number of different ways that they then can work with the rest of society, and that you can build these differences between generations with positive outcomes for all. So I think the important concept is that volunteerism can be an extraordinary catalyst for engaging youth and having them feel like they are part of something larger.
I'll ask your question. What can we do to get the community at large, not only in schools, but at large, involved in learning through service?
Thank you. Well, I think there are many levels at which one can do that, and I'm going to talk about specifically the school-based service learning. And I know there are already many examples of service learning that are in place in organizations already in Portland. But I think one of the things is to look within your own organization and say, are there some things that we need done already? And are there ways that youth can assist us? And let me give a couple of examples because I find illustrations helpful. An example was a city I worked with in Mount Vernon. They had an election coming up, and they realized that many of the people did not have the information that they really needed to make an informed vote. And so students who are Spanish speaking and involved with other communities in the community actually helped translate and create bilingual materials and figure out a way of getting that information out so that a larger population was making a more informed decision. So that was a great opportunity for students to use their language skills, use their technology skills, and to produce a product that had real value. Another example is a hospital that I'm familiar with. They really want to encourage reading at a young age. So what they've done is 4th graders who are learning story writing have actually created a program called Rock and Read. And what they do is they actually write storybooks and illustrate them and publish them, and then new moms receive a packet from these children about the importance of reading at an early age, and they receive a personalized book from a child in the elementary school that promotes reading. So I think it's really to look creatively. I think we tend to think, again, in box volunteering mean, well, we have an event and we want volunteers to show up. But instead we need to look within our own organizations and what are our needs, and are there ways that young people could assist? And then part of the challenge, and that's where the new partners person in the Portland Public Schools will be assisting with those connections. Janet Weirma, she's the person who can help kind of find those partnerships and help build a connection between your need and the appropriate classroom or school setting for that. So that's one way that I think young people and community can connect.
And I think you could really take that and just apply it across the board for any community member. If you look around and your park needs some cleanup, just picking up litter within your neighborhood park, or looking at some of the organizations that are in your neighborhood and what kind of support you could provide to them. I know as a nonprofit, when we have people come in and are willing to support us and work within our system, it makes that a real meaningful experience for us and for them.
I would also And with regard to the Portland Public Schools, they will be starting a planning process starting in the fall, and they really do want to encourage people from the community to participate either in the planning team or in work groups that will really help look at how do we expand the opportunities for service and service learning, what the outcomes are that they want from that strategic goal, and then how you can be a partner and develop the capacity in the community as well as in the school for this, because it cannot happen with the school alone. It really has to be a concerted partnership between the school and the community.
Kate, if I just might add, SOLV right now currently has an entire service learning curriculum that we've partnered with numerous sponsors, including State Farm Insurance. But SOLV right now is viewed by the State Department of Education as the curriculum, that is the model for service learning in the state of Oregon. And we offer this curriculum free of charge to public-private homeschool K through 12 education, specifically based on the SIM and CAM approach. So this would be on the SIM, the Certificate of Initial Mastery, and giving the students those benchmarks. So the programs are already in place. We welcome dialogue. We have that program already ready to offer, and all we need, it's like one hand clapping. The program is here. Who's going to join with SOLV then and get the program out into the schools? So we welcome that type of feedback and contribution. Hi, Ray.
Hello. I'm Ray Polani, a City Club member and a volunteer.
Yay!
I only have 30 seconds, so I better make it fast. For the past 25 years, more than 25 years, I've been volunteering. 10 years of which while I was working at Pacific First Federal. And when I retired, I just continued. And I continued as a retiree of Pacific First and Washington Mutual now. In any event, the question that I have is the organization that I belong to, which is strictly all volunteers, there's nobody paid. How can we grow? We have reached a point that we're stable. And some of the people are getting older, including me, and we're burning out a little bit. Mm-hmm. And how can we pass the torch? And what we're really doing is important for the future, mm-hmm. for the young people. How can we reach the young people? How can we reach the middle schools? How can we reach the high schools? How can we reach the colleges? Mm-hmm. Our message is alternative transportation and the need for it. Right. How can we do it? The question is for Alison, for Kate, for Jack, for all of you. Help! Go
ahead.
Oh, okay. I think one of the things is getting your message out there. One of the, I think, exciting things coming out of some United Way funding is really this 4-county online database that will make accessing volunteer opportunities easy. Right now, it's pretty challenging to find a place to volunteer. So getting connected with the local volunteer center, serving whatever county you're in, is a good strategy. I think looking at ways that you're using volunteers so that you have a variety of options for people. So often, I think we kind of put ourselves in a box of how we're creating our volunteer opportunities and looking at sort of that immediate, urgent need, and not looking at what would be attractive for people to come in and be engaged in your organization.
Yeah, and another thought I have is that it may be to look at, are there some needs that young people have identified that they feel are important for the community? And are there ways that you can provide the support so that really you become a partner with young people? And many young people are looking for maybe different reasons for alternative modes of transportation, and maybe there's a way together that you can work on this issue and see how you can serve their needs or their challenges that they're facing as it relates to transportation. I think sometimes we as adults have on our agenda and we don't really have a chance to sort of engage kids in the process. So starting not after you have a plan, but actually with young people as they develop a plan. Perhaps partnering with an organization, as I mentioned, one of the high schools that's working around that livability project. And
the environmental middle school.
Or the environmental middle school. So contacting an agent or group of young people who are already like-minded and then together kind of developing a project that you, and adults are critical in helping the young people be successful in those visions and those projects. They need help, whether it's technical assistance, moral support, because it's never as easy a road to get something done as people would like it to be. So I could see where you would really engender a real sense of collaboration by working together with young people.
It's a question of opening eyes, isn't it?
That's right. It truly is.
It really is, Ray. I think one of the important things, and I think Kate really brought that up, Ray, if I was you, what I would do is go specifically to some targeted high schools that have shown that type of openness to be engaged in the surrounding community and really get teachers to be turned on, and then the kids to be turned on in those schools. Key clubs, environmental clubs, those types of organizations can really, really infuse that new type of spirit that your organization is looking for. And I congratulate you, Ray. I've heard you numerous times, and you're a man of passion, so thank you.
Thank you very much. We have to multiply. I think this is...
That's it.
Thank you.
Good luck,
Yes.
Ray.
And I will just speak here that I'm going to give the phone number because we don't have a visual for Jan Werma. She's the partnership person with the Portland Public Schools in trying to really initially create a listserv and a dialogue and an exploration of what roles are possible as they begin to look, if you're not really sure what kind of opportunities you want to offer. And I'm going to give a phone number of 916-3040. So she would be a good person to sort of dialogue and explore where the appropriate partnership is.
Hi, Jay Bloom, from City Club member, and I thought I would have a very difficult time ever linking what Ray would talk about transportation in my field. But I think one key answer to his question of where we're going to find folks is actually the baby boomers, who are every 8 seconds someone in this country is turning age 50. And I would encourage us to continue to look at that as a growing resource for involvement in the communities. The question is, I'd like you to elaborate a little bit more on the infrastructure needs that you see in nonprofits being able to handle volunteers. Yes. Because assuming those 76 million wanted to volunteer in any one capacity, people really don't understand the challenges of nonprofits to utilize that kind of talent and interest.
Thank you very much. I mean, we hear this. If sometimes I roll my eyes when I hear this statement. I'll be in a setting, and someone will say, "You have 96,000 plus volunteers. You don't need any money. You don't need any money. You have all those volunteers." And it is so hard, I think, for people to understand the extraordinary labor-intensive operation it takes to engage people. The simple act of citizen engagement. You know, I hearken back, each year SOLV coordinates the largest Earth Day cleanup in the United States. Largest in the country, done right here in the Portland metro area. This past Earth Day, 96 sites, 5 counties, 3,000 plus volunteers, over 1 million pounds of illegally dumped solid waste and non-native species were collected. Does that take money? Extraordinary amount of money. And yet the return on the investment is something that the business community needs to understand. It is not just a question of donating money. It is a question of the unbelievable leverage that donation, or if you will, investment to a nonprofit organization brings back to the community. Nonprofits if the business community in general, both public and private corporations, if the business community could ever leverage the amount of money that nonprofits leverage on a day-to-day operation, on an ROI, return on the investment, it would be off the graph. The accounting practices would be true. It would be extraordinary. And I think that's one of the things that the general populace and the business community needs to understand is the true ROI of investment to a nonprofit. No one leverages an investment like a nonprofit.
I just second that wholeheartedly, and really looking at funders and encouraging them to invest in the infrastructure of volunteer management. We're seeing a real wonderful national movement around professionalizing volunteer managers and the skill sets and the best practices that go with that. And as you're looking for volunteer opportunities, asking those kinds of questions, I think, will really encourage the conversation around how we create meaningful opportunities.
Okay, my name is Mark Allen. A couple of things I'd like to address. First of all, an observation I made that I hope would never repeat itself. I used to volunteer doing sound for what's called the Northwest Folklife Festival in Seattle. Everything was fine until they abruptly decided to get rid of all the volunteer people and replace them with paid people. And I think that is one of the worst things that one can do to demotivate volunteers. I hope that doesn't happen again. The other is a question. Oftentimes I would try to volunteer to do computer work for organizations, like namely my church, which was St. Mark's Cathedral in Seattle. And they claim they have to use somebody paid because of liability, quote unquote. Can anyone comment on that? That's all I have. Thank you.
Mark, I can't comment because we haven't run into that yet, but an organization has extraordinary fiduciary responsibility. Any nonprofit worth its salt is going to go through an outside audit every year. SOLV does. And to have a volunteer be registering income and expense statements and payroll and class of nonprofit accounting is an extraordinarily complicated thing where it's not like a for-profit accounting. And believe me, I've been on a learning curve for 12 years and I haven't reached it yet, as one of my board members is laughing right now. But one of the things is that, with nonprofit accounting, you have temporarily restricted, permanently restricted, unrestricted, and they're constantly going back and forth. So Mark, it's not just a question of accounting, but it really is very, very specialized accounting principles that are unique to nonprofit corporations. And sometimes a normal accountant doesn't have that background on the nuances, the vagaries of nonprofit accounting. I can't say in your case, but okay. Yeah. Well, that's that organization. There are numerous organizations out there, Mark, that would more than be happy to accept your volunteer hours.
I'm Sean Cox, City Club member, and I promise I have a question here in a second. I work with kids affected by HIV, and when we talk about service learning, it's something that we recognize that kids experiencing a significant challenge in their life also have a tremendous amount of resiliency. So in September, rather than going to the beach and just playing in the sand, we're going to come clean up the coast with you guys with the beach cleanup. We have our kids leading a relief project for peers that they have in Mutare, Zimbabwe, who are affected by HIV. So I challenge my compatriots in the audience that work for kids, either through their organizations or on the boards that they volunteer for. But kids have a tremendous potential, and it's not just in the schools, but in the community as well. And I guess my question goes to Alison. Volunteering is up, but it's one-time volunteering. Mm-hmm. For organizations like mine, which really need a consistent volunteer corps to dedicate amount of time because they're building a relationship with kids in a program, what advice do you have, or what are some of the trends that you see, and do you see some hope in getting some volunteers who can do something more than just for one time every 6 months or a year?
I think that we like to think about using episodic volunteers as how we just sort of whet your appetite, and really teaching volunteer managers who do coordinate episodic volunteer opportunities on how you make the ask for an ongoing volunteer. I think the other piece is continuing to invest in your infrastructure so you have someone who can really build a relationship and manage the volunteer program on a week-by-week basis. So I wish there was an easier answer, but I think it's really making that connection with the individual so that they feel more and more vested in your organization.
We have time for one quick question and one quick answer.
This will be quick. My name is Carissa Thomas. I'm actually the youth coordinator for VolunteerWorks, and this question is actually for Kate. And it's around service learning and the mission of the organizations being aligned with the curriculum that's happening around service learning. And within the group that Jan is going to be working on, if there's going to be a forum for teachers and community-based organizations to come together and start to speak the same language.
Yeah, I think that's the intention of that steering committee initially, and then also the work groups. So that I think unless the service learning truly serves the organization, it doesn't last long. It becomes episodic too. So we have to make sure that the service learning is tied closely to whatever the need or the purpose of that organization is. It can evolve, but I find that initially what starts with often a very small program will evolve if indeed they are really valuable, like that hospital example with the Rock and Read. Now, more and more classrooms are partnering and providing real valuable needs to that hospital. In fact, a real neat project was an industrial design class that's actually created special needs equipment. And one of the examples I was in where I saw a child who was 18-month-old with multiple sclerosis actually received a special needs equipment from something designed by students in an industrial design class with the guidance of the physical therapist and the people. But it started off with a simpler project, evolved to where taking on more and more significant kinds of partnerships.
Thank you. If this didn't inspire you enough, let me give you one of my favorite quotes. Volunteers live longer. Thank you. City Club is adjourned.